Peter arrived home after a long, grueling day of forging up applications to places he would like to apply to. Having just recently been let go by his former employer for the last 10 years, he dreaded having to leave the little corner shop he'd worked at and spent most of his days. He'd grown very fond of the owner and his wife, Ted and Molly Bear. They also just happened to be one of his neighbors. It had been a bitter, sad moment to watch a teary-eyed Ted close the doors of his shop, one that had been in his family for 100 years. Things hadn't been going well for Peter's neighborhood over the last few years. Unfortunately, their already dwindling population had been struck hard by the recent rough economic downturn. This decline, in correlation to their rival city's overpopulated inhabitants encroaching upon their sleepy town of Woodvale, made the residents uneasy to start with. However, with limited background and experience, Peter discovered that finding a new place to work had been an uphill climb. Exhausted, he pulled a banana from his bag and started to peel it. But looking up and seeing the setting sun, Peter quickly realized that his wife Judy would have supper already cooking, so he shoved the banana away hastily. He didn't want to ruin his appetite as Judy made the best meals, even on the rapidly dwindling resources they had. Phew, finally home. Good old Woodland Terrace, Peter sighed, tapping the sign to their building as he would customarily do each day. "Good evening, Mr. Oder," he said, passing the building manager and holding his breath. Mr. Rico Odor was a nice enough person and had been the building's maintenance man for as long as Peter could remember, which explained the various peculiar odors that would emanate from him. Mr. Odor smiled, nodded, and returned to what he was doing. He didn't speak very much, but Peter still liked to say hi, being neighborly. Arriving at his door, he paused for a brief moment. For now, all his worries and concerns would need to be pushed aside and hidden away. He never wanted his wife and two beautiful children ever to see that deep down, he was concerned about his family's future. Then, taking a deep breath, he entered. "Judy, I am home," he called out with a smile on his face. "Daddy!" came a shout from one of the bedrooms. His two children burst into the living room, hopping and bounding all the way, quickly embracing their father. "We missed you," said Ruby, his 9-year-old daughter. "Yeah, Daddy, what did you bring us?" his 6-year-old son Buster asked, immediately drawing a punch from Ruby. "Shh, you know." She paused, looking at her father's face. As hard as Peter tried to hide that things were tough, Ruby was a very perceptive child and could always tell when something was bothering him. Peter smiled. "It's okay, Ruby," he said, reaching into his bag, pulling out a slightly worn toy car and handing it to Buster. He'd found it lying in the grass on his travels, hopping from place to place, submitting his applications. Buster snatched it from his father's hands and took off, running back to his bedroom. "Thanks, Dad," he shouted back, making vroom noises as he ran. "And for you," Peter said, turning to his daughter with a smile. He pawed around in his bag and pulled out a small chair carved out of a block of wood, something he'd been working on the last few days during his journeys. "This is for your dollhouse," he said, handing it over and tapping her nose. "It's so your Kimmy can invite more friends over to her parties." "Oh, thank you, Daddy," she said, gushing, wrapping her tiny arms around Peter's neck, pecking him on his cheek and racing away. "You spoil those two." Peter rounded to find his beautiful wife standing in the kitchen archway. She was wearing a smile, but Peter knew there was something off. "What's wrong?" he asked, worried. "Do you have anything in that bag for your wife?" she asked, brushing off his question. She tapped her foot, arms folded across her chest. "Well," Peter said, playfully approaching her, fiddling in the depths of his nearly empty bag. "Just this." He leaned in, kissing his wife, pulling his empty hand out. "Oh, is that all?" she responded with a wry smile, turning away. Peter's worry rushed back when he saw the red lines in her eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, following her into the kitchen. "I'm hungry," Buster hollered from the room between the vrooms. "2 minutes, kids," Judy answered. "Nothing," she said to Peter, placing a plate on the table. After 12 years of marriage, Peter knew she wasn't telling him the truth. "Judy, what's the matter?" he asked again. "Not right now," she snapped. "Let's just eat, okay? I'll tell you after dinner, after the kids go to bed." Peter sighed and nodded. Kids? Dinner. The happy family of four sat for dinner, just as they had done every night. Ruby and Buster talked about their days at school as Peter listened intently. Judy enthusiastically talked about her day out shopping and how she found all the best bargains. Thankfully, Peter thought to himself, just one more thing he was grateful for that his wife did, recognizing that times were difficult and they needed to scale back. No more name-brand stores or anything like that. He learned a lesson from one of his friends years ago. He too had been let go from his job, and instead of cutting back, his wife kept spending like crazy, essentially bankrupting them. They moved out of Woodland Terrace a few years back, and he never saw him again. No, Judy would never do anything like that. They were a genuine partnership through and through. After dinner, while Judy cleaned up, Peter helped the kids with their homework until bedtime. "Daddy, could you read us a story?" Ruby asked. "Of course, dear." Peter turned, grabbing the first book off the shelf he saw. "How about I Am a Bunny?" "Yeah, I love that one," Buster roared. Peter finished reading the story to his children, tucking them in for the night. He returned to the living room to find Judy sitting at the dining room table with a single sheet of paper in front of her, face racked with worry. Peter approached cautiously, sitting across from his wife. "What's that?" he asked, almost petrified to hear the answer. He'd never seen her so concerned before. We're being evicted," she finally said, choking back a stream of tears. Peter's heart sank to his feet. He couldn't believe what Judy had just dropped on him. "How's that possible?" he blurted. "We've always paid rent. We're not behind, are we?" he asked quizzically, looking at Judy. She had always managed the money. He trusted that she paid the bills on time. "No, we're not late. I always pay on time." "Then why are we being evicted?" "The buildings have been sold," she answered, sliding the eviction notice across the table. "The new owner is kicking everyone out," Judy said, drawing a shocked expression from Peter. "I looked into it. This big investment company from the city bought the building, someplace called Crawley Investments. They plan to bulldoze our home and turn it into a new housing tract." "Oh God, Peter, what are we going to do?" She shrieked, on the verge of hysterics, burying her head into her hands. Peter got up and hugged his wife. "It'll be okay, sweetie. We'll figure it out." "We always do." "How?" "How? We could barely afford this place, and it's rent-controlled, and that was when you were working. But now, oh God, what about everyone else in the building?" "Shh, it'll be fine. I told you we'll work it out. Let's just go to bed. We can brainstorm tomorrow." Peter led his wife to their room, but his brain was already storming. She was right. They could barely afford their lives now, but if they get kicked out of what has been their home for the last 14 years, what will they do? He had to do something, but what that was would have to wait till morning. He needed to comfort his wife now. Over the next several days, Peter did nothing but scour the internet and law books at the library. He desperately looked for any way to stop the new owner of Woodland Terrace from tearing down the building. Peter abandoned his former job hunt, which had so far been fruitless because nothing else mattered. If they didn't have a home anymore, he figured, what was the use of having a job to pay rent when there was nothing to rent? Judy would help him occasionally, but she was barely holding it together. He'd catch her walking through the apartment somberly as if she was saying goodbye to every inch of their home. So many memories contained inside it. There was no way he was going to let it go without a fight. One morning, by a sheer stroke of luck, he discovered a potential solution to the problem while combing over one of the library's old law books. He was so excited he raced home to tell his wife. "Honey bunny," he shouted, bursting through the door, startling Judy and causing her to drop the plate she was washing, shattering it all over the floor. "Peter, oh my God, you practically startled me to death," she whined, hand clutching her chest and blowing out an exasperated breath. Disappointment stretched across her face, looking at the mess she'd have to clean up, and reached for the broom. "Honey, that can wait." "I found it," he said gleefully, waving the book like a madman. "Come here." He took the broom from her hands. "I'll clean it up in a bit. Come sit." He led her to the dining room table. Calming herself, Judy sat across from her ecstatic husband. "Okay, now what are you going on about?" she inquired. "I might have found a way to stop them from demolishing the building." "How do you feel about becoming an owner?" Peter queried with a smile. "What? Owner of what?" Judy questioned, having no idea what her husband was talking about. They already could barely afford food and rent, let alone buy something as significant as a company. "A share of our property, the building itself," Peter exclaimed, flipping open the book to a page he'd marked. "There is something called a co-op building." His wife stared blankly, clearly having no idea what he meant. "A co-op building," Peter went on to explain, "is where the tenants, us, buy a share of the building, or so I think." He paused, skimming the page again. He didn't know much about the law or investing for that matter, but to him, at first read, it looked like a possible solution to their problems. "From what I understand, all we would need to do is convince the new owner that it would be more profitable to sell everyone here a share of the building, and then we get to keep our home." "That sounds great," Judy said, though her tone of voice suggested otherwise. She'd been doing some research herself into the person who bought their building. A Mr. Adder Crawley, and from everything she'd discovered, he didn't sound like a nice person on paper. But she decided to keep that to herself because of how enthusiastic Peter sounded. "I hope it works," she added, feigning a smile. "Me too," Peter said, closing the book, getting up from the table and heading for the door. "Where are you going?" "First, I'm going to call to schedule an appointment at Crawley Investments to speak to Mr. Crawley himself. Then, I'm going to go visit Mr. Owley." "Now, why are you going to go bother Virgil?" she inquired. "He used to be a law professor, remember, before he retired. I want to ask for his help on this, so when I have the meeting, I'll be fully prepared." Judy nodded as Peter exploded out the door almost as fast as he'd come in it. The day came for Peter's meeting with Mr. Crawley. He sat nervously in the reception area, waiting. He always felt uncomfortable dressed up. The collars of button-up shirts always seemed to dig into his neck, rubbing it raw. He glanced at the clock over the receptionist's head as she clacked away at her keyboard. It was already well past their meeting time. It had been scheduled for 4 p.m., but it was now 4:30 p.m. The receptionist glanced up at Peter as he tapped his foot in a nervous twitch. She smiled but didn't say anything. Instead, the look they shared between them told all the words needed. This was a typical strategy employed by her boss. A type of power move, he guessed. "Send him in, Jill." A voice crackled over the intercom phone on her desk. "Mr. Crawley will see you now," she said, standing to lead Peter to the door. "Don't stare." "He has a skin disease. It's like he's shedding," she whispered into Peter's ear as he entered the office. "Goods afternoons, Mr. Cottonmouths," Mr. Crawley said, standing, holding out his hand to shake Peter's. The investor tycoon's hand was flaky, skin dry, but surprisingly warm to the touch when he shook it, like his sweltering office. Peter also noticed that Mr. Crawley spoke with a very noticeable lisp, placing a long S at the end of nearly every word he said. It's Mr. Peter Cottonworth, sir," Peter hesitantly corrected, taking a seat. "Oh, so sorry about that. My assistant must have misspelled it when she put it on my calendar. So anyways, what can I do for you, Mr. Cottonworth?" "Well, I am here to talk about Woodland Terrace Apartments," Peter said, drawing no reaction from Mr. Crawley as if he didn't recognize the name. "The apartment complex your company just recently purchased in Woodvale." "Oh, yes, I remember. What about it?" "Well, sir, the word is that you plan to demolish it and build a new housing tract." "Yes, that's the plan. We just need to wait to get all the current tenants out before we can begin construction. Are you looking to invest or be the first buyer?" A smile drew across his face. "Well, sort of, sir. See, I am a tenant of Woodland Terrace, where my family and I have lived for the last 12 years, and others in the building have called it home for much longer than that. The smile quickly evaporated from Mr. Crawley's face as he leaned back in his chair. Mr. Cottonmouths, I see what's happening here, and I get it. Then he cleared his throat, putting on his business voice. Relocating is never easy, and I know times have been tough in Woodvale for a little bit now, so I don't usually do this, but I am a reasonable man, and I don't enjoy putting people out. So, tell you what, how about I help with the relocating? I'll give every tenant $1,000 to help cover those costs. How does that sound? Is that what you wanted to speak about today? Peter sat back, exposing a slight frown. From the research he and Mr. Owley had done, that was actually part of the law when forcing tenants of a building out. The property owner must offer compensation. Peter was starting to understand who he was dealing with now. Well, sir, I actually came here with a proposal. Okay, I'll hear you out. Like I said, I am reasonable. What have you got for me? He leaned forward, forearms up on the edge of his desk. I propose we enter into a housing cooperative, Peter said, putting on his best sales pitch voice. A co-op situation, then. Yes, exactly. Essentially, we are just buying shares of the property, thus giving you continued investment instead of building the housing track where the banks make money on the purchases of the houses. Yes, I am familiar with how the process works. How many tenants live there at Woodland Terrace? About 100, sir, Peter answered quickly, wanting to show the businessman he was prepared. Mr. Crawley sat quietly in thought, rubbing his hand on his chin, skin flakes floating away. Okay, tell you what, the demolish crews have been scheduled for 3 weeks from now. So, I'll give you 2 weeks to get everyone in the building to agree to enter the co-op. If you can do that, I'll cancel the demolition, and you can stay. But, that's it, 2 weeks. Peter couldn't believe his ears. Did he just convince a corporate bigwig not to demolish a building, putting 100 families out with no place to live? Peter leaped to his feet. 2 weeks, yeah, I can do this in 2 weeks, he jubilantly exclaimed. Great, you get me those signed agreements back in the next 2 weeks and you have yourself a deal, Mr. Cotton. He paused. Mr. Cottonworth, he said, appearing proud that he managed to call Peter by the correct name this time. Consider it already done, sir, Peter said, shaking Mr. Crawley's hand before practically floating out of his office. Peter spent the rest of the day on top of Cloud 9. After he met with Mr. Crawley, he raced home and began working on his plan immediately. How was he going to convince Woodland Terrace's occupants that his idea of turning their once-beloved home into shared joint ownership with a corporate 500 company? When the simplest of ideas befell him. Talk to them like they were family. To him, everyone in the building practically did feel like an extension of his own family. The next day, Peter began to put his plan into action instead of spending it looking for a job. He had a bunch of flyers printed and distributed them all over the building. He slid them under doors and posted them in hallways, common areas, and all about. They simply read, "If you want to save our community and have some great home-cooked sweets in the process, then please attend the meeting Monday evening on the back lawn at 6 p.m. Once he finished with that came the second part of his plan, which technically should have been his first part for obvious reasons. It was Judy who would have to be the one doing the cooking. He now needed to convince her to make her world-class cookies. "Honey, what is this?" Judy asked, walking in with an armful of groceries. Uh-oh, she'd found a flyer before he had a chance to discuss it. Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that," Peter said hesitantly. "Well, you know how I told you about what happened during the meeting, yeah?" "Yeah. How Mr. Crawley agreed if you got everyone to sign off on entering the co-op, we'd save the building. I remember she was waiting for him to spit out whatever he had planned or committed her to." "Exactly. So I figured instead of going door to door and talking to everyone, I'd do it in one fell swoop and make a community meeting." "That's brilliant, honey. But now we must buy these world-class sweets, though, right?" she said accusatorily. "Well," Peter's mouth suddenly ran dry as he scratched the back of his ear. "Peter, what are you not telling me?" I was hoping..." "You want me to make these world-class sweets, don't you?" Judy replied, arms folded across her chest, tapping her foot on the floor. "Yes," Peter responded timidly, making his best, "Honey, I'm sorry, but please" face. Judy hated having her services volunteered without Peter first consulting her. He invited his old boss and his wife over for dinner once without checking with her. She didn't let him hear the end of it for a week. "Think about it, hun. You've always wanted to be a pastry cook. Now you can try it out on the neighbors." Peter waited for the blowback to start. His wife stood silently, still tapping her foot. The corner of her mouth eventually curled into a smirk first, followed by a smile. "Great idea, babe," she pronounced to Peter's surprise. "I love it. You're brilliant. I guess I have to get started right away. We have over 100 neighbors." "Oh, geez, I have to go back to the store," she said, putting the last of the groceries away and turning to her husband. "And you're coming with me. Also, you're going to help," she said with a slightly more sinister smile. Peter shrugged. Small price to pay, he guessed. Monday came. Peter had spent the whole afternoon preparing the back lawn for his big community meeting, enlisting the help of his 2 children while jumping back and forth checking on his wife to make sure they had everything set and ready to go. He helped her bring down the trays of not only the cookies but cupcakes, cannolis, and platters of pigs in a blanket. She even went out and purchased several gallons of juices for the event. Judy loved to party plan, even entertaining the idea of opening her own party planning business. She'd managed all this on their shoestring budget. The stage was set. All they needed now was the residents to show. Peter stood just outside the building's door, nervously waiting for the first neighbor to show up, watching the time tick by. 6:01, 6:02, 6:05. No one had shown up. Peter turned to look at his family with disappointment in his eyes. What went wrong, he wondered. Everyone he'd previously spoken to expressed a desire to stay. Peter's shoulders slouched as he stared at Judy and the kids. "Daddy!" Ruby shouted, hopping up and down frantically, pointing at the door. Peter turned to see Mr. Owley leading a group of residents outside. "Peter, you've done a wonderful job organizing this," he said, shaking his hand and offering a pat on the shoulder as he walked by, going straight for the chocolate chip cookies. He was then followed by a procession of residents pouring out with smiles on their faces, greeting him as they walked by. Even Mr. Odor, who Peter could instantly smell from several yards away. Another familiar sight from one of the occupants of the building, a boy named Reed, blitzed by in a blur and headed straight towards the platter of pigs in a blanket. No one quite knew what apartment he came from, and no one ever saw his parents in any of their recollections. The boy just appeared one day roaming the hallways of the building several years prior. He even saw the reclusive Mr. J.R. Rudiger timidly appear. Peter didn't know too much about the man other than he seemed to be in his early 30s. He kept odd late-night hours and was routinely seen hanging around some less than reputable company. Some residents noticed things missing from their homes shortly after he arrived, but no one could really believe that one of their own would steal from them. The twins Sally and Sandy, Peter's downstairs neighbors, also made an appearance. They were identical twins. You could never tell the difference between the 2 girls. They were precisely the same, down to the clothes they wore and even the white streak that ran down the middle of their hair. The only thing known for certain about them is they seemed to enjoy squabbling between themselves, constantly bickering and chasing each other around. It was as if one couldn't have anything the other didn't. Peter waited for everyone to gather as the residents poured out of the building and onto the lawn. Judy floated over, embracing her husband. "Look at what you did," she said, indicating the packed house he'd managed to conjure up. "I am so proud of you," she said, pecking him on the cheek. "Thanks," he whispered, returning the kiss. But this was the easy part. Now, convincing them all that a co-op will be a good thing. Peter took front and center and readied himself. "Welcome, neighbors, friends. Thank you all for coming," he started. "As you all know by now, our beloved Woodland Terrace has been bought. The plan is to demolish the building and build another great big housing tract to modernize Woodvale, which leaves all of us looking for a new place to live. But this is our home. We've all built lives here that I, for one, am not ready to give up. For most of us, this is our last refuge. He paused, fighting back a solemn tear, thinking about the memories. For most of us, we can't afford any of these newer places to live. I mean, Mr. Bear, how long did it take you, Mrs. Bear, and your kids to find just the right place to live? You once told me that all the other places you looked at were either too big or too small, but Woodland Terrace is just the right size you needed, right? Mr. Bear smirked and hugged his wife tightly. And Mrs. Charlotte, what about you? You must have all the memories of raising all your kids in that apartment of yours, watching them all fly out the door and doing great big things in this great big world. Are you really willing to just let that go? But what can we do about it? A voice chirped from the crowd. Mr. Woody, so glad to have you join us. Peter tried to hide his disdain for the man. Mr. Hugh Woody was pleasant enough in person. Still, he always had an affinity for making loud noises throughout the day, like he was banging or pecking away at a project in his apartment, which annoyed Peter. So, what can we do about it? He repeated. I mean, we only have a few weeks left. Well, that's why I gathered everyone here today to talk about that. I went and spoke with the man who bought the building. I pleaded our case, and he agreed. Agreed to what? Shouted Sally, fighting off Sandy, who was trying to snatch the cannoli from her despite having a fistful of sugar cookies of her own. He agreed that forcing people out of their homes isn't the best thing or something he really wanted to do. So I proposed another option to him. Peter paused, hoping that his sales pitch would work for a second time. I proposed to him that he could keep the building standing, let all of us live in it still, and make money in the process. He could see the skepticism set on their faces. We can achieve this through what's called a co-op. Mr. Owley smiled, as that was an idea they explored when Peter came to see him. What is a co-op? Mr. Oder asked. Well, Peter thought about how best to sum it up without going into great detail. It's a form of joint ownership. We, as the residents, will be part owners of the building, essentially securing our rights to continue to live here. And we would all share in the expenses of building maintenance, but again, it would allow us to keep our homes. Peter knew that he just boiled the whole thing down to its minimum explanation. If you want to know more about it in detail when you leave, please take a contract and a pamphlet that explains it all in further detail. My kids will be handing them out. He pointed behind everyone to where Buster and Ruby were standing by the doors. It'll explain everything. What's the catch? Mr. Ruttinger hissed. There's always a catch. It's not necessarily a catch, Mr. Ruttinger. More of a stipulation. The only way I could get Mr. Crawley to entertain and accept this offer is if everyone, the entire building, signed the agreements. So if you all feel like I do, judging by the looks on all your faces right now, I think you do, then this will work. Peter could see it in all their faces right away. Everyone in attendance was on board. I can't speak for everyone here, Mr. Owley said, but I, for one, am with you, Peter. I'll sign the contract. Me too, Mr. Oder shouted, shoving another cupcake in his mouth. This affirmation was followed by a chorus of residents expressing they were in on the idea. Peter felt a wave of relief swell inside. Thank you, all of you, thank you. I know we'll make this work. Now we have until the beginning of next week to submit the contracts. As I stated, please take one on your way home. I'll be by this weekend to collect them and personally take them to Mr. Crawley first thing next Monday morning. I've already got an appointment scheduled. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'll be seeing you later this week. And with that, everyone started to depart. Judy glided over to her husband. That was fantastic, honey. Great job. I really believe we'll be able to keep our home now. Very well done, Peter, Mr. Owley said, approaching and giving him another pat on the back. Good job. All that's left now is to collect them and give them to Mr. Crawley, Peter said with a smile. Much to Peter's liking and surprise, the Woodland Terrace residents were all but too willing to go along with the proposed co-op plan. They began hand-delivering the contracts to him well before the imposed deadline. One by one, they knocked on his door to drop them off and offer their biggest heartfelt thanks. He'd saved their building, their homes, and their lives. Monday morning rolled around quickly. Peter woke up early. He wanted to count the stack of documents and compare them with the list of the building's 105 occupants. He needed every one of them to have returned their contracts, as his meeting with Mr. Crawley was set for 11 a.m., and he wanted to be prepared and on time. 101, 102, 103. Peter paused. He reached the end of the pile. "Oh dear," he said aloud, clutching his chest as he felt a flutter. "What is it, hun?" Judy called from the kitchen. "There are only 103 contracts here. I am missing 2. Peter got up and began searching the apartment. "We need all 105, he said, his voice growing in concern as he frantically searched. "Hun, calm down," Judy said, watching her husband pace around the room, turning seat cushions and opening cabinet doors. "Maybe they just haven't turned them in yet. You did say that you'd go and collect them. You just got lucky that everyone was excited to bring them to you. Who is missing?" Peter stopped and slid back to the kitchen table to check his list. It looks like Mr. Ruttinger and the Grayson sisters," he replied, checking the last names off. "See, no worries. At least you know who. And calm down, hun. You know the Grayson sisters are absent-minded, and Mr. Ruttinger keeps those odd midnight hours. Now go and get ready and stop by on the way over to the meeting. I am sure it'll be no problem." Judy was right. It wasn't that big of a deal. He had plenty of time. The first stop was to the Grayson sisters. Peter knocked on the door, and Sandy, or maybe it was Sally, who knew, answered. "Oh, hi, Peter. What brings you by this morning?" Peter tried to hide his frustration. "Well, you know it's Monday, and I've got to get our contracts to Mr. Crawley. Did you and your sister sign it?" "Oh, duh. We totally forgot that was today." "Sorry, Mr. Cottonworth, just 1 minute." The girl retreated into the apartment. Shortly after, he could overhear an argument coming from the back bedroom, which wasn't anything new, as they always argued about everything. Peter stood in the hallway waiting. He could only hear snippets of what they were saying, but it seemed to be over money, which Peter didn't think too much of, as almost everyone in the building had money issues. Finally, one of the twins reappeared with the contract, which looked a little worse for wear. "Here you go, Peter," she said, handing it to him. "I think what you did for us. The building was fantastic. I don't really care what Sally thinks about it." She turned her nose up at her sister, who appeared with a snarl on her face. Peter smiled and took the papers. Thanks," he said hesitantly, not knowing what that was all about. "Good luck today." The interaction seemed strange, but he had no time to waste. He still needed to pick up one more contract. Knocking on Mr. Ruttinger's door, the reclusive J.R. cracked it open, only enough to stick his face out and block Peter's view of the inside as if he were trying to hide stolen merchandise or something. "Good morning, Mr. Ruttinger," Peter said with a smile. What do you want?" came an unexpected, terse response. "It's Monday, Mr. Ruttinger. I stopped by to see if you have that contract ready for me. Then I am off to Mr. Crawley's." He checked his watch. He had an hour left before the meeting. Yeah, about that. I am not signing," he said, slamming the door in Peter's face before he could even react. A second later, the words were like a gut punch to Peter. He needed all 105 signatures. "Mr. Ruttinger?" "Mr. Ruttinger?" Peter shouted, frantically rapping on the door. He must have heard him wrong. "Mr. Ruttinger, what did you say? Did you say you weren't signing?" Peter was stirring such a commotion that some of the neighbors had begun to poke their heads out into the hallway to see what was going on. "Mr. Ruttinger, can we talk about this?" The door swung open again, this time allowing a full view of the living room, revealing a stack of brand new items. "I said I am not signing. It's a foolish idea. I don't want to own any part of this building. But, but, Peter stammered. Why? I've got 5,000 reasons why, he said. Someone showed up at my door 2 days ago offering me $5,000 not to sign your cockamamie plan. So I took it. I've got to think about number one, man. You know myself. So, goodbye. He slammed the door again and cranked up his music. Peter was stunned, shell-shocked. This had to be Mr. Crawley's doing. But why? He needed answers. Peter stormed into Mr. Crawley's office. He sat back in his seat with a phone pressed to his ear. Why? He demanded, shouting at the businessman. Mr. Crawley calmly finished his phone call. Why would you do this? Why would you make me go through all this when you were going to snake in and buy people off like that? Simple, Mr. Cottonworth, the businessman with peeling skin responded with a smirk. I knew you wouldn't just go away, so I needed to preoccupy you so I could complete my deals. And I knew one of you low-rent, low-class vagrants would eventually sell out. It's just called business, my friend. The property that Woodland Terrace sits on is much, much more valuable as a housing tract than a co-op apartment complex, he said with a snort and a hiss. And now everything's in place, and you have until the end of the week to get out, he blustered, slamming his flaky hand on his desk. As for now, you have 1 minute to leave my office voluntarily before I have security escort you out, Mr. Cottonworth. Peter felt the presence of 2 security guards lurking behind him. He wanted to fight back, but knew he couldn't. He couldn't do anything. I am not your friend, and you're a horrible, horrible creature, Peter shouted. Why don't you just hop along and run home and tell your wife and kids that you're a failure? I sincerely hope you find a new place to live, he declared, laughing the entire time as Peter was escorted out of the office and thrown out of the building. Peter strode back home as suggested, where almost the entire building was waiting for him. He had to break the terrible news to everyone. Some cried, and some just solemnly retreated to their apartments to start packing. Mr. Owley approached a heartbroken and defeated Peter after all the others dispersed. You gave it your best shot, kid. Unfortunately, that's all you could have done. Thanks, Virgil, Peter said, hanging his head as he disappeared into his apartment to help his wife and kids pack. The dreaded moving day was upon the residents of Woodland Terrace rather quickly. Some had already departed a few days prior as they said their goodbyes to friends and neighbors. But for the most part, everyone wanted to leave together. Peter walked about his apartment one last time, flashing back to memories as he passed each section, remembering fondly the day he and Judy first crossed the threshold as a married couple, and the day she said they were having a baby. He recalled the locations of Buster and Ruby's first steps, memories that will soon be bulldozed. Peter, it's time. Everyone's waiting, Judy said, poking her head in. Okay, hun. Right behind you. Peter followed his wife outside, where everyone awaited his arrival. They were all packed and ready to go. They didn't want to leave, but like so many hundreds and thousands before them, they had been forced out by a big corporation. Peter faced the gathered mass, all set to make the trek into a new unknown. I am sorry, everyone. I really am. I thought it would. Nothing to be sorry about, Peter. You tried, Mr. Owley assured him. It's time to be going now. Will you lead us out? Peter managed half a smirk. Yeah, I can do that. Keeping a brave face, he turned and set out to cross the streets into the unknown and beyond with his family in tow. A car screeched to a halt, nearly hitting Peter. Standing frozen, shock enveloping his body for a few seconds, Peter stared down the vehicle, ensuring it had come to a complete stop and wouldn't move again anytime soon. Satisfied, he nodded for the rest of his family and everyone else to continue. They sadly marched across the road one by one. First, the Grayson sisters, then Mr. Woody, Mr. Oder, Mrs. Charlotte, Reed, Mr. and Mrs. Bear, and Mr. Owley, followed by the Cottonworths Buster, Ruby, Judy, and lastly Peter. From inside the car came an equally loud squeal as the brakes before. Daddy, Daddy, look! A little girl pointed out the vehicle window. There's a whole bunny family, the child squealed once more. Her father cringed, knuckles gripped tightly around the steering wheel of the car, huffing and puffing. John, you almost hit them, the man's wife chastised him from the passenger seat. I know, dear. He let out a frustrated sigh. Oh, Daddy, look. There are more animals. I see squirrels, a bear family, a deer. Oh, looky, a spider on the windshield. The man tensed. He was afraid of spiders, especially the poisonous ones like the black widow, currently skittering across his windshield. Whoa, look, an owl flying by and a woodpecker and ooh, a skunk. Where are they all going? Why are they leaving the woods? Isn't that their home? The little girl asked, watching the procession of animals fleeing Woodland Terrace. Well, actually, Susie, her father said, relaxing as the animals made their way across the street. That'll soon be our home. See, they're going to be tearing it all down so they can start building our house to live in. But, where are they going to live? Susie pointed, sadly pouting at the animals crossing the road. Oh, don't worry, they'll all find a new place to live. But that doesn't seem fair, Susie questioned, feeling sorrow for all the animals that had just lost their homes. Well, life's not fair, and this is called progress. John, really, I can't believe you just said that to our little girl, the woman remarked, shaking her head as her husband drove forward. Have some compassion or something, geez. Don't worry, honey, they'll all be okay. As the car drove by, little Susie turned in the back seat and peered out the rear window, catching a glimpse of Peter, who'd backtracked to make sure everyone had made it safely across. I am sorry, little bunny, she said, waving before sitting back down.